Well, the Kansas City Chiefs did indeed somehow, some way knock off the Houston Texans in Week 15 on Sunday, December 18th. It was ugly. It took overtime against the worst team in the NFL. Carl Cheffers had another banner, awful day officiating with the rest of his crew, but somehow the Kansas City Chiefs escape with a 30-24 win over the Houston Texans. I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski. He is Dan Lucero, recapping the entirety of this 30-24 Chiefs win. And, well, I'm not really sure where to start with this one. The Chiefs won. That should be fun. That should be happy. And yet for the second week in a row, I almost feel empty that the Chiefs came away with this victory. Last week, they gave up 28 points to an awful Denver offense that had scored 20 plus just twice all year. The Chiefs barely escaped with a win. This week, it truly felt like the Chiefs escaped Houston with a win. It shouldn't have even had to go to overtime against the worst team in the NFL. The Chiefs have to punt in overtime. They amazingly actually get a takeaway, which they have barely done all season. Shout out to Frank Clark and Willie Gay for making it happen. I guess if you're a Chiefs fan, you're happy about this because you won and you still are in the hunt for the number one overall seed in the AFC. But man, I don't feel great having to go to overtime and winning by one score over a team that's playing with a couple quarterbacks who are maybe not even going to be on their roster next year and certainly won't even be starting.
Well, we start with the good, which is we have been asking this defense for a couple of weeks now. Go make a play when the chips are down. Go create a turnover when you need a stop. Go create momentum, flip the field, do something to swing a game. We've been wanting to see that from this defense for a good chunk of this season, and we saw it. Frank Clark makes a great play to strip the ball from Davis Mills. Willie Gay with the tremendous desire to get that ball in the pile, just rip it away essentially from Dare Ogunbowale of Houston. That's the play we've been waiting on this defense to make for a while, it feels like. So tip of the cap to them in that regard. They made the clutch play. They got the takeaway. That's good. They're division champions for a seventh straight year. That's good. You never apologize for a win in this league. That's good. We really thought coming in, given how poorly Kansas City closed the deal against the Broncos, who also stink, who might be the second worst team in the league behind the Texans.
Yeah.
And given the way that the Texans played the Cowboys to the hilt, played hard, had a chance to take a 2-score lead with 3 minutes left, 1 yard away from doing that on a 4th and goal, and they couldn't close the deal. But they were there. They had that opportunity. They played Dallas, one of the better teams in this league, really, really tough. We thought that given that, the Chiefs would be on high alert and that this would be the game where they would come in and not play with their food and be focused from minute 1 to minute 60 and not be surprised that a team with inferior talent and less to play for actually wanted to play hard. And they were. It looked for the second straight week like they were caught off guard a little bit when they got tagged in the nose. And at this point, we've been waiting, I think, for the Chiefs to flip a switch and take their game to another level. Start crushing teams, because that's what really good teams do, right? Sometimes the early portion of the season can be fits and starts, and by the time you get to November and December, you're really rolling. And that's kind of been the Chiefs' MO too. They've been a great November-December team. They've got one loss with Mahomes as their quarterback and all the starters playing in November and December since Mahomes has been the quarterback, and that was a couple of weeks ago against Cincinnati. So they're usually really good this time of year, but we're waiting for them to get to a next level. And this is the kind of performance and the kind of game that, even though it's a win, it starts to make you question, do they have that level in them? Do they have that next tier to get to? Or is this just kind of what they are? A young and frustrating defense that doesn't have that playmaking knack, and an offense that is self-sabotaging at the worst possible times.
And I guess for me at this point, after 2 straight wins like this, the question is, why should we feel different about this year's team than we did about last year's team at this same time? Where, yeah, they won a bunch of games in November and December, and they went into the postseason looking like they were still one of the better teams in the league. They got to the AFC Championship game, but then when push came to shove in a big game against a really tough opponent, they fell apart. Truly, they fell apart. We've talked all about the momentous collapse at the end of the year against against Cincinnati last year in the postseason. They had a bunch of games where they should have won by a lot more. Last year, you had 13-7 over a Green Bay team that did not have their starting quarterback. That was the MVP of the NFL, a guy who had never really played meaningful snaps before. 19-9, an ugly game against Dallas. They had the 6-point overtime win over the Chargers. They lose the game to Cincinnati. They barely beat Denver in week 18 last season. Well, then bring it to this year. And last week, you should have beaten Denver by a whole lot more than 6 points after letting them back in. You should have crushed this Texans team. In all likelihood, they should have beaten or, potentially beaten by plenty that Bengals team they lost to 3 weeks back. That's your road stretch here for the Chiefs. And you're in a lucky position now because you won this game that you are still in alive for the hunt for the number 1 overall seed. Had you lost this game, that's gone. That is over. It is done with. You are not getting there. So the fact you won this game, there's obviously a lot of value to it. But I just wonder, why should we view this team, this Chiefs team right now, any differently than we retroactively feel about last year's Chiefs team? Or even in the moment, why should we feel any different than what we did last year where, hey man, there's worries about this defense. There's some concerns about some of the play calling and some of the decision making. It's funny that the game-saving play in this one was defensive because you had Frank Clark stripping the ball away. You had Willie Gay doing a great job. And I thought Trent Green did a nice job of pointing it out on the replay on the CBS broadcast of him fighting to get the ball away from Ogunbowale to keep the game alive for the Chiefs and to get the takeaway. But this is now 2 weeks in a row against awful, not bad, awful offenses in which the Chiefs have allowed them to hang around and to put up season-high point totals. I put this on Twitter. They mentioned it in part on the CBS broadcast. Kevin Harlan did as well. Last week, the Chiefs gave up 28 points to a Broncos team that all season had broken the 20-point threshold twice. This week, they gave up a season-high tying 24 points to the Texans, a team that had broken the 20-point threshold all of 2 times all season. And that's where the worry seeps in. Three times all season. That's where the worry seeps in for me, that you should be putting these teams away. That Cincinnati game, you can talk about how, hey, they made all these mistakes. They should have won. Hey, whatever, it's a good team. You move on. Well, this is now 2 weeks in a row. They barely beat crappy teams. I have legitimate worries at this point about the Chiefs' ability to play above the level of their opponent and to pull away victories, because 3 games in a road trip, which you don't see very often. You don't see many 3-game road trips in the NFL all that often. The Chiefs did nothing to actually look impressive in any of those games.
I think that in this game, because last week they threw a great first punch. They came out of lock and they were up 27-0 on Denver. They came out ready for business, and then they got sloppy and careless, and Denver wanted to make it a game, and Kansas City was like, "What, dude? We're up 27-0. Chill." They're like, "Come on, man! Take it easy." That's not really hard-hitting analysis. I know that's not really what you come here for, but you get the idea, right? They had built the big lead, and they did the thing that kind of today we were wondering where it was. Where is that first punch? But the theme is the same, that the Chiefs looked surprised and almost a little offended that one of those teams in the league would dare to hit them hard, play physical, get after Mahomes, strip the ball away, play to win. The Texans, they got a bunch of guys playing for their jobs. It's not as talented a roster 1 through 53 as the Chiefs. That's obvious. The record tells you enough there. But those are young guys. They've got some hunger. They play downhill. I don't believe that the Chiefs are soft, but they were softer than the Texans today. And I think that mindset is what is so troubling right now for the Chiefs. I don't think it has anything to do with, I think the ability is there. And I think the record speaks to the ability, the talent level of the 53-man roster. But I just think, I don't know if you want to call it arrogance. I don't know if you want to call it softness. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's something insidious that is keeping the Chiefs these last 2 weeks from doing what a great team does. And that's not play with your food, stomp them, beat them down, give your starters the fourth quarter off. That's what, when a championship team is rounding into form in November and December, that's what they do. And this doesn't look like that right now. I don't think there's any harm in saying that. You can be optimistic and say, hey, still got Mahomes, still got Kelsey. The running game right now is really coming alive and looking good. Although, again, the Texans not a great opponent, but the Chiefs have run it really well for the last couple of weeks now, really starting to develop that running game. You can say the good things. The good is really good, but man, the mindset is really troubling. It is not a championship mindset for this football team right now, it doesn't appear.
I've got one big positive, one big negative from this game that are kind of ancillary points to the general sort of malaise that the Chiefs have been in. That doesn't include Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, we haven't really talked about him in particular for this game as of yet, and we're 10 minutes into the show. Patrick Mahomes at one point completed, did it end up being 19 straight completions at the end of the game?
I think it was his last 19 passes ended up being complete. Yeah, he was postured. He was 36-41, I think. And he ran for a touchdown, threw for 2. He was absurd. There was one miscommunication on first drive of the game, that deep ball to Valdez-Scantling. Valdez-Scantling broke it off. Mahomes thought he was coming in. Like, that's just miscommunication. It's two guys that played together for 14 games. You know, Mahomes and Tyreek Hill would be on the same page in a spot like that, but MVS they weren't on the same page. And then there was the drop by Justin Watson. The deep ball maybe a little underthrown because it's on the run, but still Watson's got to make that sliding catch at midfield on that pass out of the end zone. Other than that, like, I mean, take those two throws out of the equation. He's 36 of 39. Like, yeah, we can't take that for granted. We can't just brush past that. He was unbelievable today.
He was tremendous, and this was from Jordan Foote of Sports Illustrated, just put this on Twitter. 87.8 completion percentage. That is the highest mark of his entire career. The previous best was when he went 10 of 11 against the Broncos back in 2019. Unfortunately, we remember how that game ended up with Patrick Mahomes with a sideways kneecap and then missing 2.5 games because of that injury. So he was great in this game. The two things that stood out even more than that, the running backs, RB1, RB2, are playing really well right now. Jerick McKinnon has been playing out of his mind as a receiver in these last couple of games. He was huge today catching the ball. He ended up with receiving numbers of 8 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown in the game. He also had good days from Travis Kelce and Juju Smith-Schuster, 10 catches each for 105 and 88 respectively. But McKinnon goes for 8 and 70 through the air with a touchdown. On the ground, 10 carries, 52 yards, another touchdown. That will absolutely play. And Isaiah Pacheco had another really solid day, that makes me a little bit frustrated. He didn't get the ball more, 15 carries, 86 yards. That's 5.7 per carry. I know he fumbled the ball. I understand that has been an issue for him and it has to be worked out. But right now, that's the group more than anything that is giving me a lot of confidence in this offense, because we know Mahomes is great. We know Kelce is great. We know Juju has had a really good year overall. We expect that from those guys at this point. But Pacheco and McKinnon, the two of them combined for 138 yards on the ground and then another 70 through the air. So that's 208 total yardage. And Pacheco caught a pass as well. So 219 total yardage between the two of those guys in this game. That's extremely encouraging that those two seem to be playing their best football in the most important part of the year.
Yeah, it's making the offense a lot more well-rounded, and it comes back to the one thing that maybe more than an intangible is hurting the Chiefs right now, and it's the turnovers. Because this is a very different game if the Chiefs don't fumble twice and have it recovered by the Texans, because both of those turnovers, the fumble by Pacheco and the fumble by Juju Smith-Schuster, which, by the way, if you have seen conclusively a replay that shows Houston recovering that fumble, your name must be Carl Jeffers, because he's the only person on the planet that saw that play and ruled a clear recovery on replay by the Texans, because CBS sure as hell didn't show any replay angle that would have said that there was a clean recovery there. It looks all the world like Juju falls on top of that football. Like, I don't know what to make of that. Carl Jeffers, Travis Kelce was right 6-7 years ago, however long it was. He shouldn't be working at a Foot Locker. Like, he's not fit to wear that uniform. It was just a disgraceful officiating performance. One of the least officiated teams in the league, got penalized 10 times, and a lot of them were phantom flags. It was a bad day for the officials, not an excuse, and you can laugh about it now because the Chiefs won if you're a Chiefs fan. But, yeah, hideous day for the company. Just wanted to throw that in there. But the turnovers were what changed this game, because that's 2 empty possessions for the Chiefs, and both of them turned into touchdowns for the Texans. If not for that, we're having a very different conversation. The Chiefs probably do take care of their business in this game fairly routinely, if not for a 17-yard scoring drive and a 50-yard scoring drive allowed by their defense on those short fields. So that's the thing that has to change. 9 straight games. An Andy Reid team has never had a turnover stretch this long. 9 straight games with a turnover. If that doesn't stop, and there is a limit to how high this team's ceiling is, if they start taking care of the football, There might be no limit. That's what's so frustrating.
There was one other game this season, by the way, in regard to the penalties. The Chiefs have been penalized double-digit times. That was 10 when they took on Tennessee back on November the 6th. Other than that, I mean, it's actually ridiculous. They've 3, if you want to throw it all together, in which they had 8 or more, and the game in which they had 8 exactly was against San Francisco, and it really didn't matter because they walloped the 49ers. Every other game this year, they've had 6 or fewer. Sheffers can't do the job. He cannot do the job well and does not deserve to get those opportunities. So I can't wait for the AFC Championship game where he gets the assignment because, of course, that's going to happen this season. But the other major negative thing along, on the flip side of the ancillary benefit of the running backs playing so well, Butker is a problem, man. And I know everyone knows it. I know there are not a ton of staunch defenders at this point, except for our guy, Fulton Caster, who we will, of course, hear from coming up Monday on Mic'd Up with Jake and Fulton from noon to 3 here on 580 WIBW. Not here, but there. You understand what I mean. Butker's a problem. He missed another extra point. He missed a field goal. And things seem to come in waves when they're struggling for Harrison Butker. He seems to be a very up and down confidence kind of player. He feels to me, and this is going to maybe fall on, not make sense to some folks. This feels like sophomore year Christian Brown. And CJ Moore of The Athletic did a piece about it. He talked to us on 580 Sports Talk about it, that when he makes his first shot, he is great. When he doesn't make his first shot from 3, he is a net negative player. That was his sophomore year. Junior year, he was obviously tremendous. It feels like that for Butker, right? Like it comes in waves. He missed that field or the extra point early. And when he came on for what would have been the game-winning field goal, I don't know anyone who is confident in him making that long kick because it just feels like he rides these waves game by game. It's an issue at this point. And we were talking about this with Fulton on Twitter today. He's making 83.3% of his field goals between last season and this season. That's not good. That's fat Randy Bullock kind of numbers. You can't live with that when you need to rely on a guy who's making that kind of money. So again, in the end, it works out. But nobody in the Chiefs kingdom wanted this game to come down to another field goal. Absolutely nobody, because nobody would have had confidence in it.
Yeah, the Harrison Butker's best friends in the world right now are probably Matt Amendola and whoever that other dude was for the Chiefs that came. Matthew Wright, who came on when Butker was injured early in the season, because those two guys stunk it up. And if one of them hadn't, there'd be a lot of calls. There's no backup kicker, but there'd be a lot of people wanting those guys to get another look if they hadn't messed up their opportunities with the Chiefs. Yeah, it's been bad. And our guy Vance on the YouTube comments, I think speaks for a lot of fans. It's time for the Butker experience to come to a screeching halt. Stop trying out kickers now. Yeah, it's a very different feel if he makes a field goal at the end of regulation. At the same time, I don't care who the kicker is, unless it's Justin Tucker, and he's not infallible either, but don't allow the game to come down to a 51-yard field goal if you don't absolutely have to. I hated that end game from Andy Reid and the Chiefs. Hated it. And they kind of got what they deserved a little bit with Butker missing that kick. But yeah, it's all year long. His kicks are fading right, except for there might have been a problem with the hold and the missed extra point. I know some people on Twitter pointed out it didn't look like the laces got all the way around from the hold from Townsend. And even Butker kind of looked down to his right a little bit after that to kind of say something wasn't right there, because he hasn't been missing left all year. He missed that one left. So, but yeah, you have to be more reliable. You have to be, it's always something, isn't it? If it's not Butker, it's penalties. If it's not penalties, it's turnovers. If it's not turnovers, it's play calling, or it just feels like it's always something that's holding this team back. It feels like it should be better. And it's pretty damn good. There are not a lot of teams out there 11-3 after this week, right? It's pretty damn good it is. But it just feels like it should be better, and there are so many little reasons why any given week it's not.
We will talk more about this game in full coming up on the Sports Voice of Kansas on Monday. Mic'd Up with Jake and Fulton from noon until 3. Then Dan and myself will have you from 3 until 6 on 580 Sports Talk. That is coming up on 580 WIBW and live on the Sports on 580 WIBW YouTube as well. But until then, be optimistic, enjoy it. You only get so much NFL season. You only get so many wins at a time. So enjoy it as best as you can. We will talk more about this game coming up on Monday. The Chiefs beat the Texans in overtime, 30-24. We'll talk about it on Monday. We will see you then. For Dan, I'm Brendan. We'll talk to you coming up, Mic'd Up and 580 Sports Talk Monday